Well, that's some bullshit. All right. Morning, everybody. Morning, Calgary. Let me know when you got me. Send me an emoji. Tell me you care. Okay. So, it turns out I do have the advanced lecture today. And what I'm going to do is part 2 of Redux. What we covered in part 1 was, a bit about state management. With state management, there's kind of 3 components we care about: the state, actions that will change the state, and then possibly selectors, which are things that just sort of format or do some logic on state in order to get some information. I actually worked on a thing last night. My wife she wanted an app. Her thing was that she works at the College of Physicians and Surgeons in the registration department, and what she has is actually her first day yesterday, and she immediately was like, "Hey, can you build an app for this one thing?" And it was that she has this sort of record of all these dates of a physician doing something, and she needs to express it in how many weeks they were there. So if you have 2 dates, she wants to know, okay, how many weeks is that? And what I did.
Wouldn't each month be different?
Well, but that's the thing, is that she basically given 2 dates. She wanted to know the number of weeks. Yeah, or be able to express that difference in weeks. And so I put together this, and let me. It's not showing fully on the. Yeah. Tell you what. Let me. Body. Padding. There we go. So the idea here is that, yeah, I'm able to put in a date and then another date, and it shows, I order them chronologically and say, okay, this date is 11 plus 1. So it's 11 weeks plus 1.
With respect to the other one.
Yeah, with respect to the other one. And what I did here, if we want to take a look at this in kind of its own what's it. I know it's a little off to the side there. I should put that in a container, but inspect. So if I go to the React, I did not use Redux for this, and the React isn't showing up. Boo, I guess. Okay, so that won't show. So yeah, what it ends up doing, I guess, it's weird that React isn't showing, but whatever. So what I did was I wrote, so I have, my state is a bunch of dates. It's actually a bunch of moment objects, but same diff, right? And then what I did was, and this is the reason, the entire reason I bring this up, is because I made a function called paired dates. And what paired dates does is it takes the dates and creates a new array that compares each date to its previous date and figures out for each one, if there is a diff from the previous one, what that is, and expresses it in weeks. And so this is a selector. The point of this doesn't change the state in any way. This doesn't add any state. This just takes the state and formats it, or does some querying or does some analysis of it in a way that actually helps me understand what's going on. So yeah, state is a snapshot of the current state of the app. Actions are changes that could be made, or things that could possibly trigger changes to the app or trigger other actions. And then selectors are, hey, we just want to take the state, we want to format it in such a way that we can understand what's going on. Have a bit of smarter what's it. So.
You named it paired dates and not coupled dates?
Yes, I did not name it coupled dates. We're a couple. All right. So, yeah, so that's an example of I should call this like dates with diff, because that's really what it is. But then I put that dates with diff, like that's part of my render, is that right there. Okay. Yeah. So what I'm doing is I'm going to take this app, leave site, which should look familiar to someone, at least in this room. I don't know anyone. Does this look familiar to anyone? And what I'm going to do is let's just say that we have been handed this Redux app, and we want to, or we have this React app, and they're saying, hey, you know what? This app is way too complex for our state management tools anymore. We just can't handle it. We need to make this a Redux app. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it down and make it into we're going to write a reducer. We're going to do this stuff. But another thing that's going to happen here is that I can include this, and you'll notice it goes to a loading tasks state, right? And the loading clears. So what we really want to do is say, we want to be able to write some stuff for that. So I am going to yarn add Mocha. Or actually, I think I have, if I say yarn test, I think it has a test thing. No test found. Okay. So I should be able to add a tests folder. And I'm going to write reducer.test.js. So the test match is, okay. Yeah, so it's saying it just says no test found. I'm going to describe my to-do list reducer. It rocks. Should have at least a passing test there. Excuse me. Okay. Apparently not. We'll save that for the time being. Okay. Let's go to the source here. I think I might just be doing jest wrong. Jest is it's a testing framework like Mocha, but it also has a lot of like matches and stuff that work well with React. So it'd be great to get into if you want to do test-driven development, you want to do test-driven development with React. So React, Jest, testing React apps. So we already have that, yada, yada, yada. Show me a test. Show me a test. Test. Okay, test and expect, apparently. Test. And yeah. No, that's not a test. This is interesting. Okay. We won't use Jest, we'll use Mocha. So yarn add Mocha. That's going to take a moment. And what I'm going to do here is, I'm still going to keep that one test. I'm going to go back to doing it. Mocha away. So once Mocha sees this, it should be okay. And sorry about that diversion. So what we're going to do is we are going to start writing a reducer that's going to represent all of this app logic, right? We are going to have a tasks thing. So our state is going to be, there's going to be tasks. There's going to be whether or not it's loaded. I might also include this into the task list, or I might not, the value of this field. But yeah. Okay. Mocha. There we go. So let's, in source here, I'm going to just say I'm going to have a Redux folder. And in there, it's not a folder, that's a file. And in here, I'm going to create, there we go, my reducer.js. And I'm also going to include actions.js. I might, we'll see how this goes. So I'm going to function reducer. So what does a reducer have? What does it take as arguments? So the action is one, and there's another thing. The state, exactly. State and action, and what does it return?
New state.
Returns a new state, that's just right. State plus action equals new state. So right now, this reducer works. Doesn't do anything interesting, but it works. And in fact, I'm going to say what my initial state's going to be. Const initial state equals just that tasks is an empty array. So reducer state action. So state equals initial state. So I have that, and I know, okay, so I'm going to write this test, and I'm going to describe, I'm going to say it returns an initial state with tasks, with an empty array of tasks. All right. I'm going to say Mocha watch. There we go. So we're going to use the nancat for our indicator of our application success. Okay, so returns initial state with an empty array of tasks, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in const. Can I do import here? I think I can do import here. Import reducer from that's right, Mocha. This needs to be in ES5. So const reducer equals not import require. Okay, so what I expect I'm also going to, while I'm at it, yarn add chai. Ugh, are you really going to be this much of a pain? Please don't. Oh, I didn't save that. Is what's happening. Okay, so it's going to import reducer equals require reducer. And I'm going to expect, if I just say reducer with nothing, and it's undefined, and I give it sort of a blank action here, I expect that to deep equal this. It's saying reducer is not a function. That's right. Export default function reducer. Damn it. Okay. Should have double checked this with Jest tutorial. I have had Jest running. I'm surprised it's not. Give me a moment here. Yeah, this should work. So go to create tests. Oh, I know what's up. In fact, I may move this into here. Move. I'm going to say yarn test. You find that test. Yes, it found the test. Cool, one failed. Yeah, and the reason it failed is cannot read property deep of undefined. That's true. Expect from chai. Cool, so this one thing passed. All right. So now I want to, what are the things that we're going to be able to do? It should go to loading if a get is requested. And what we're going to basically say is, hey, when I say I'm going to fetch some requests or fetch some tasks, it should go to loading. If I say, hey, I've got those tasks, it should stop loading, right? Kind of like if we look at our to-do list JSX here, it goes to fetch tasks, so it goes to loading true, and then it goes to loading false tasks. Loading true, loading false tasks is this stuff, right? Same thing here with toggle task. Hey, this set state. So we're going to copy all of this over. And we're going to copy every step. So starting to say it's true will then be like, okay, that's started, and now we'll move to the next thing. So it should go to loading if a get is requested. It should add tasks when they fetch. It should, in fact, I might kind of pair some of this off and just say, hey, describe getting tasks. It's like this. Describe adding a task. That's going to be my other big thing, right? And describe toggling a task. Okay, so adding a task. it should go to loading if a add task request starts, and then it should go, it should add the task. The task when an add task request ends. That's what's happening up in here, right? I set it to loading when it starts. When I get it, then I set it to the new thing. And you can see how this is saying like, oh, we're skipping these tests. They haven't been done yet. So same thing here. Describe toggling a task. If a toggle task request starts, it should update the task when a toggle request, task request starts and ends. So now I have a complete description of my reducer, right? Which is, it's all the stuff that I wanted to know. This is all the things it should do. That's my entire application, all set up. So I am going to now say, okay, I have that reducer, and I'm going to start importing things from actions. I say a get should be requested. So that means that my actions, so there should be a start fetch action, right? Like that should be a thing. We're okay with that? And I should say, I expect reducer with the sort of, I'm going to say undefined because it's going to be its initial state, and the start fetch action, or if I say here, tasks is that. So I should expect this to deep equal. That means that it's not just they're the same object, it's like they're shaped the same. To deeply equal an object that says loading true, and maybe still tasks is empty. Right? Now if I look here, there's a few problems with that. Expected tasks blank to deeply equal loading true tasks blank, right? There is no start fetch action. Let's start with that. So let's go to my actions here. I'm going to export start fetch action, which is going to equal type start fetch, or maybe fetch started. Yeah, that's totally a thing. Export const. Right? It should do a loading if it gets requested. So here, we have that fetch started. I'm going to make a constants file here. And I'm going to say that we have a export const fetch started equals. You don't really have to do this, but I just find it's like, I just want to make sure that I got the right thing from the right place. So import from constants. I like being able to like do this and then just say, oh good, that's the one I wanted. And then this type becomes fetch started. There have been a few times where it's like it hasn't been working and I haven't been able to tell, and that's because I mislabeled something in my constants, because I'm a dum-dum. Big stupid, dummy stupid. All right. So here I'm going to say, I'm going to put in my switch statement on action.type. I'm going to put my default is going to be return state. And I am going to say import from constants fetch started. Cool, cool, cool. And I'm going to say case fetch started. I want it to return dot 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 state, but loading should be true. Cool. My test passes. Okay. Then I am going to do another one. I am going to say, excuse me, back to my test. Right, so should add tests when they fetch, which is going to be, I need to make an action here with a task in it, right? So const, what do I call that? Start fetch action? Start fetch completed action. And I'm going to have to pass in some tasks here, like, I don't know, task, name, write tests. Yeah? Doesn't really matter what I put in here because it's just going to be added directly. So I'm going to say fetch const action equals fetch completed action, which that I want to get from here. Now, I already have enough to cause this test to fail, which is good, because I don't have a fetch completed action, right? So I'm going to say up here, export const fetch completed action equals, and then we have some sort of payload of tasks, we're going to call this. And I'm going to return an object that says type is maybe we're going to say it's fetch completed. Type fetch completed, tasks is task. And I'm going to go over to my constants and say, hey, export const fetch completed. Right, so fetch completed, tasks. And then over, so now it passes, but I need to write the rest of my test. Right? And I should say I expect is it reducer? No, it's, yes, reducer of, tasks, whatever, loading true. I should expect that if I do that and pass in the action, I expect this to deep equal, I guess just, let me just say const tasks is this thing, so that I have that. Tasks, deep equal, tasks should be tasks, right? So basically it should take off the loading and it should just have a tasks of whatever this thing is. And it does not. So let me plan that. We're going to grab fetch completed. We're going to say case fetch completed return. And so here I'm going to say const. Actually, to be honest, I only need to return that the tasks is equal to action.tasks. That's my entire state right now. Right? No loading, no nothing. Cool. So now we have that first step. So do we want to, yeah, I will, yeah, I know what I'll do with this. Okay, so we're going to leave this B for a second. And we now have two actions that are on the other side, on both, like they're both on each side of an asynchronous process, right? We should start the fetch. We should let the thing know it's starting the fetch. And then when it goes, we should show it's completed, right? But how do we actually tell it to do this? How does that actually work? What we need to have is we basically need to have another step where we can tell our Redux store, hey, start this action. Or we either need to be dealing with all of our asynchrony outside of our reducer or inside it. Or we need to be outside of Redux store or inside a Redux store. So how can we put that inside the Redux store? Well, this is where a kind of big part of Redux comes in. There's two kind of, like, I feel like the reducer itself is a pretty simple concept compared once you're used to it, right? State plus action equals new state, right? Like, that's not as hard. The idea that an action could have a payload, okay, I guess that makes sense, right? But I find that okay, this is like the 40 steps you have to go through to attach it to React. That's a challenge. And to remember all the parts and why there need to be different parts. And the second thing is middleware can be a bit tricky. Now, so I'm going to start writing a middleware. I'm going to make a middleware folder or middleware file here. And what I'm going to do in my index.js here is I'm going to start bringing in some of this Redux stuff. So I'm going to say import from Redux. Oh, I actually have to bring in Redux first. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Yarn add Redux and React Redux. So import Redux. I'm going to import create store and apply middleware. We saw one middleware yesterday with Logger, but the idea with middleware is that, well, let me const store equals, let me grab import reducer from Redux reducer. And I'm going to say here, const store equals create store reducer. We've already kind of done this one. So let's, here is a middleware. Here's a simple middleware. And this is going to go kind of between the dispatch and the reducer itself. So it's like, yeah. Guys, did I do the useless box thing with Express middleware? Where you saw the box where you just click it and it just clicks back? Yeah. Right. So let's make one of those. Const useless middleware. It's pretty simple. It's just a function that has store, next, and action. Kind of like what were the three things that any middleware had in Express?
Response, request, and next.
Right. Response, request, next. Well, request, response, next, but yes. So let me write this middleware. It's just going to have the store, which is this store here. It's going to have a next, which is a function that's going to be like, let's pass on the next. And it's going to have the action. And so the simplest one goes like this. That's a useless middleware. Does nothing. Now, I'm kind of lying about how this works. There's an important point I went over, but I want you to get used to this, like take a look at this, get used to this. Because what we're going to do is this, but whoever wrote this was apparently like they had just read a Haskell textbook like that week. And so instead of writing it like this, one function that takes 3 parameters, they wrote it as 3 functions, each of which takes 1 parameter. So they wrote it like store. There's a function that takes in a store and returns a function. That function takes in a next and returns a function. And then that last function takes in an action and then actually does the thing, right? So if we called it somewhere, the only difference is that instead of calling it like useless MW store comma next comma action, we're going to call it like useless MW store next action. That's the only difference. It seems more complicated. It is not. The Haskell functional programming language, every single function they do like this. Every single function is curried, which is to say that it takes, it's a partial application. Anyone ever okay, you guys have heard me talk about how a function is like a recipe and the product, its application is like a cake, right? So partial application is a little like a cake mix, where you have some of the ingredients and you do some of the stuff, but there's still like other ingredients to add in other bits of the process later. So this is like, oh, I'm putting on all my dry ingredients, and then this is, oh, I'm putting in my wet ingredients and doing something. So don't let this part freak you out. But this is a useless MW. This totally works. And I can say apply middleware, useless MW. I can even put it in a debugger here just to see this. Well, doesn't do anything yet because I would have to start it. But that is, in fact, let me, store.dispatch type hello, right? So yarn watch, yarn start, I guess. And what we can see is, oh, I guess it didn't actually, oh yeah. So there's my debugger, right? I got in there, it actually happened, type hello, but it's not actually going to make a change. So that's the thing. All right. So why do I bring up, why do I bring this up in the terms of, like, why do I bring up in the world of asynchrony? Because what we're going to do is we can use this, we can create middleware that does some of their, like, it accepts something, right? So this is a good place to trigger another async action. I'm going to import some stuff from task service. And what I'm going to import is the get tasks. And the get tasks is a promise that resolves with tasks in a bit. So I'm going to import get tasks from task service. And I am going to export fetch tasks middleware. It's going to have the store next action. And what I'm going to say is that if the action.type bang equals, well, I need a constant here, right? Import from constants. I'm going to go to constants and say trigger fetch. So everything you do here is going to be able to trigger fetch. So yeah, in my middleware here, I can say trigger fetch. So if action.type is not trigger fetch, then just next action. We're done here. That's fine. But if it is, then we are not going to pass it along. What we're going to do is we're going to import from actions here we're going to import the start fetch action. And we are going to say else store.dispatch start fetch action. We're going to say, hey, you know what? Actually, I need you to just start this fetch action thing. And then let's even make this an async function. We're going to say, export const. We're going to say const tasks equals await get tasks, right? And then we're going to say, so this is start fetch action, and I guess the other one is fetch completed action. Then we're going to say store.dispatch fetch completed action tasks. So what we're saying here is, hey, when we get that trigger fetch action, what I want you to do is make a start fetch action here and then dispatch a fetch completed action. Make sense? So let's actually see this in motion. I'm going to go back to my index.js here. I'm going to import from Redux actions. And I'm going to say here, I need to have a start fetch. So that's fetch started. I may rename this. And then make sure that that's also, yeah, fetch started action. Awesome. I think my test got that too. Fetch started action, fetch started action. Yes, awesome. And what I'm going to say here, my reducer, test.js reducer. Yeah, that's good. And my actions, I'm going to make a export const trigger fetch action, which is just type trigger fetch. I'm going to go to my store is this. I'm going to import the trigger fetch action, and I'm going to say store.dispatch trigger fetch action. And I'm going to console.log. Well, for right now, I'm going to say store.subscribe store.getState. Okay. So in my console here, let me see. Right. So nothing's happened because I triggered that fetch action, but then didn't actually apply the middleware. So, okay, so I now have written this middleware. I'm going to apply it. Import from Redux/middleware. The fetch tasks MW. Apply middleware, fetch tasks MW. And now, what happens in my console is, so let's go through the line of what happens here. I'm going to put a debugger here. And that's going to show us every single action that comes through. So the first thing that happens is I have an action of trigger fetch. That's the first thing I send to my store. Hey, you know what? I need you to start getting something, right? Trigger fetch never goes to the reducer. The reducer never sees trigger fetch. What it does see, because I just said, hey, send that, is a fetch started action, right? Because I said dispatch that. And that is going to trigger a change that says like, okay, yeah, I got that action. I'm going to do something with it. And now this has happened where this actually completed, right, with some tasks. And so my action here is now fetch completed, and it has those 2 tasks. So those are the 3 steps. I said, hey, middleware, can you start this process going? And the middleware was like, sure thing. Here, we'll start the fetch. I'll trigger an async action. And when it happens, I will end the fetch. I will have that request. Right? So this is another kind of Ajax like API thing, but it's like we did this. So in the same way, if we look at this line here, this is that same process. I start the fetch, I change the state, I wait for the thing to get done, I get that, I change the state again. Make sense? All right, so we're going to do this for the other 2 actions that are just basically going to follow this. I am going to go to constants, export const, trigger add, export const, add started, export const, add completed. And if you were really being fastidious, you should also have error messages here that's like, hey, we couldn't do it because this. You should have those as well. In your real apps, but for lecture, I don't want to. So that's that. Okay. Trigger toggle equals toggle started ended equals toggle ended. Or completed, I should say. Should be consistent. Okay. Right. And then here I'm going to do the same thing where I'm going to make actions for everything. Export const trigger add action. Now that's going to have a payload, right? Because I have a name of a thing that I want to add. So that's going to be task name. And that's going to return, well, yeah, type trigger add, add completed, add started, trigger toggle, toggle completed, toggle started. And I'm going to say trigger add, and task name is task name, right? Export const add started action just has to be type add started, and then export const add completed action equals type add completed. But I think that if I look back here, I actually have a new task as part of my add task, right? So go back to actions. I'm going to say add completed should also have task. Type add completed task. Okay, And then export const. No, I guess that's it for the add section. In our reducer, we have to do this case add started, which is just going to be return state, but loading is true. So we still want to keep the rest of the tasks that come from the state, and then case add completed is going to be const new tasks is, again, copying this from to-do list here, equals yada, 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 except instead of this .state.tasks, it's just state.tasks. And instead of new task here, it's going to be action.task. Right? I get that from the state, I get that from this thing, and then I return. I also want it to be loading undefined, so const loading state without loading equals state. New tasks. So this is, let me add, let me go back to my middleware. I got to do another one of these for export const add tasks. MW is store next async action. I'm going to grab trigger add, and I'm going to add started action, add completed action. And I'm going to do much the same thing here. Store.dispatch, add started action. I'm going to grab the add task function here, const new task equals await add task action dot task name. Store dot add completed action. New task. There we go. Right? Same, exact same shit. So if I still have this debugger here, what I'm going to do is go back to my index.js. I'm going to add the add tasks MW. Oh my goodness, this is taking forever. I'm going to do that here. Store.dispatch trigger fetch action. I think I'm going to set a timeout of, I don't know, 5,000 milliseconds, and I'm going to say, I'm going to grab the trigger add action here. Hey, after 5 whatevers, I'm going to trigger the add action with play banjo, right? So, okay, so we have this. So it says this, still says tasks array 2. Three banana, 4 banana, 5 banana. Did I not save one of these?
Well, there's stretch projects we can work on with you guys.
Yeah, there's always stretch products you can work on with Redux. We don't have necessarily a set for you, but if you want some things to work on with Redux, I got some things for you. Yeah, so this should have... Oh, I know why. It should be trigger add. That's why. Okay. Say to loading true, and then cannot read type of undefined. And this happened in step constants.js. That doesn't sound right. Source Redux middleware JS 5. Action task name. So, yeah, I'm not sure why that's not. Oh. It looks like the action says any. Yes. Sorry about that. Yeah, so we have, it's starting the adding, and now it is new tasks. That's what I wanted. This should be tasks is new tasks. So what we have here is, here's our array, loading true. Here is our, okay, we got stuff. Here is our, now it's loading true again. And then here is our, okay, now we have 3 tasks. We have walk, dog, buy bread, play banjo. Right? So that's kind of the steps to make your own middleware, which is obnoxious. Can we all agree that that was obnoxious? Are we all fine with admitting that that was ridiculous? We're all fine with that? So what we're going to do when we come back is we're going to show a few ways of doing this a little bit differently so that we can actually not go crazy writing. There's still going to be a lot of boilerplate of writing a bunch of stuff, but we can write our, there's a few different libraries for writing these that we can use, and we will not have to write such convoluted middleware. Yeah, let's take a coffee break and we'll come right back. Rarely. All right, I guess we're all here, except of course we're not all here, but that's fine. Okay, let's get to the biscuits. Okay, so like we covered, that was crazy. Look at this. We have to have a trigger fetch action and a fetch tasks MW, right? Like that's a lot of stuff. So what I'm going to do, I've included a logger middleware here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something called, I'm going to include Redux Thunk. Now Redux Thunk is actually really stupid easy. You'll be pleased to know. All it is, in fact I could write it here in just a couple of lines. Const thunk mw equals store next action. And I'm going to say this, hey, if type of action equals function, then I want you to call this action on store.dispatch. So basically what this happens is this action is going to assume you're going to pass it the dispatch function. The actions, if it's a function where you're assuming it's a function, we'll pass the dispatch action to, and then else just next action. And if it's not that, we won't do that. Okay, so now we're going to get rid of this fetch tasks MW and add tasks MW. We're just going to have this thunk MW. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a couple of thunks for this. We're going to take our middleware. We're going to grab all of this stuff. We're going to copy it over. But I'm going to say export const fetch tasks thunk instead. And it's going to take in just async dispatch. That's it. And so what I'm going to do is I can get rid of this if-else statement. Don't care. And then I just make it, hey, dispatch this, and then dispatch that. Same thing here. Add tasks thunk. Yada, yada, yada. Async dispatch. That's it. So they're a lot simpler, right? They just take in the dispatch and they do some things that will eventually dispatching. This is dispatch a started action, wait for that thing to happen, and then dispatch the completed action. So if I go back to my index.js here, I can comment this out. I can comment this out. I feel like I'm missing a thing. Hold on. Like, I think I deleted a thing I didn't mean to. There it is. Okay. So again, let me import logger from Redux logger, and then let me write my thunk middleware again. My apply middleware now has more general middleware than it does specific middleware, which I think is good, right? So it's going to have logger and thunk. And then instead of bringing in these actions in middleware, I'm just going to bring in two thunks. Import from Redux thunks. And I'm going to import fetch task thunk, add task thunk. And I'm going to store.dispatch. I think I still need to pass in a task's name here that then does a thunk, just so I have it, because there is no action there. So here I'm going to trigger the fetch. I'm going to, what did I call it above? Fetch task thunk. And then down here, I'm going to trigger the dispatch the add tasks thunk. And I'm going to sort of let this thing handle that. So now, I think I have to go yarn start again. So now, so let's look at our list here. I have no action, and that just starts the process of creating my first, empty thing, right? Then the fetch starts, which means, hey, I have no tasks, but we're now loading, right? Once it completes, then we have fetch completed, which says, okay, I had nothing. My action that says fetch completed has two tasks. My next step is just that. And then I have an add started here, where it's like, oh, okay, I've started this adding process, and then an add completed. So we don't have this extra action clogging up our middleware. We don't have a lot of that. So in fact, if I switched the order of these logger and thunks, we'd have one less thing to see. Let's take off that subscribe here. And you can see a few problems here showing up, which is like, hey, trigger toggle, trigger completed, trigger started. We never actually ended up using them. Okay, so let's go back to actions here. And we can get rid of, oh, because we haven't gotten to the toggle part. Okay, that's why. But we can have the trigger fetch and trigger add, never used in thunks. Don't even need them. We've had these things now managed, like, hey, I'm going to send these things if this thing happens. Let's do one more thunk here for toggle. We're going to export. We're not going to export the trigger actions anymore. I don't care about that. Started action is going to be of type toggle started. My toggle completed action will be type toggle completed action, or sorry, type toggle completed, and the action will be, or I think it'll just have a task in it. Let's take a look at the do list JSX, see what it does. Yep, toggle task is, yep, okay. And now our last thunk is going to kind of look like this. Only we're going to translate it. Export const, oh, toggle task thunk is going to have a task ID. And again, async dispatch. Yeah, we're going to say ID. So here, instead of this dot set state loading true, we're going to toggle started, toggle completed. So instead of this, I'm going to say dispatch, toggle started action. And all of this stuff is actually going to go into, like, we're not going to do that here. We're just going to say, hey, once we have the toggle task, we're going to say dispatch toggle completed action. Saying in actions. Right, sorry, that should be task. Toggle task is not defined in thunks. Right, because I need to grab that from the task service. So now we still are, like, it's the same format, right? And now we have to go back to our reducer. We have to update the reducer to say, like, hey, we now have a few more things to plan for, like toggle completed and toggle started. Case toggle started is going to be return ... state loading true. Case toggle completed, and this is where we kind of bring in like this part of the logic. Where we say old tasks equals state.tasks, new tasks equals old task.map task. Const toggled task equals action.task. And we're just saying here, like, okay, go over it. If it's this one, return it, replace it with this one. Otherwise, return the toggle task. And then instead of this dot set state, which doesn't mean anything, we're going to return the state, the new tasks, and we're going to do const loading state without loading equals state. And now we have tasks is new task, right? So this is just, hey, let me get the old tasks. In fact, let me just say here, I'll leave it as B. Okay, so these are the steps that we had to do. This is taken straight from our to-do list, so we're not doing anything above and beyond what we were doing for state management before. And because I had the wherewithal to make this a to-do list presenter, we know we have an add task and toggle task. So let's go to the steps of actually creating the Redux version of this in React. I'm going to go to my index. I'm going to take the thunks out of here. I'm going to keep my thunk MW. I'm going to take out all of that stuff. I am going to import provider from React Redux. I am going to wrap that around my to-do list app. Actually, I'm going to put that here and comment it out for reasons. Provider, store is store. Provider. And I have the to-do list here. Why not? And document.get element by ID root. I am root. Okay, component is index.js. Right, I can take that out. To-do list.jsx. Oh, sure. All right. So I'm going to take that presenter and make it its own file here. To-do list. Wait, is it its own file already? Yes, that is already there. Haha, good. Okay, and then I'm going to make this Redux to-do list.jsx. Now, what do we need? We need to import React from React. We need to import connect from React Redux. And we're going to want to import presenter from presenter. So when we do connecting to React Redux, and we want to take a component, we'd be like, look, we already did the provider store, so we already told the entire app, hey, this is your Redux store. This is your state management. It comes from here now. We need to actually make a connected presenter. So it's a presenter that's being sort of like, it's getting its stuff straight from Redux. So what do we do? There's two functions we need. Map state to props and map dispatch to props. Which takes in state and returns something. And function map dispatch to props. Dispatch. We're also, if we wanted to, we could put props here and we can get what the props were being passed to it. But for right now, we don't need those. And we are going to export connect map state to props, map dispatch to props. Presenter. And I guess I don't actually need React itself. Export const Redux to-do list equals connect. Okay, so what is the map state to props? What's the purpose of it? And what I'm going to do is I am going to, in my index.js, I'm going to import Redux to-do list from Redux to-do list. And I'm going to create a div. Oh, I don't need a div. I think I just need to say Redux to-do list. Oh, export default. Oh, then I should be able to just say, okay, this is saying children only expect to have a single element. Fair enough. Let's go back to the index here. So it's saying that expecting provider to have just one element, not two, which we can provide by just wrapping those two things in a div. Right? Cannot read property map of undefined. Okay. So in our Redux to-do list, it's having a bit of trouble. So let's provide it with the stuff it needs. We're going to return. So our presenter, as we see here, it requires tasks, loading, add task, toggle task. Now, which of these four are state? Which of these four are data? And tasks. Yeah. So we need to pass tasks and loading from our Redux store down to this. So I'm going to say here, return tasks is state.tasks, and loading is state.loading. Okay, so now that is ostensibly happening, although there are no tasks to be had. What I need to do in my index here is my store, and I often have to do this, I have to trigger the fetch tasks thunk. I have to trigger that first thing, and usually this is where I do that. Store.dispatch fetch task thunk. This is a common thing where you make an app and then you have to tell it, hey, start this, right? In my to-do list, I put all that in the component did mount, fetch tasks. Here, I'm going to be putting it just here. I created the store and dispatched something. Fetch tasks thunk. There we go. Define but never used, trigger toggle, define but never used. Okay, so this, you can see now, this stuff is happening. Now, which two things of these are actions?
Add and toggle task.
Add and toggle task, exactly. So we know that our map dispatch to props, where we define our actions, is going to need add task with a task name and toggle task with a, here's add task, task name, toggle task ID. Okay, so we need those. Oh, and comma. Okay, now we have that done, right? And we can trigger the toggle task and add task, except for the fact that they're not doing anything right now, right? So what do they need to do? Well, I have access to dispatch, And I can bring in, instead of importing that from that service, I'm going to import just these thunks. I might import actions as well if I had to, but for right now, I just really care about these two thunks, considering all my actions are sort of asynchronous. And I'm going to import the add task thunk and the toggle task thunk. And here I'm going to say dispatch add tasks thunk with task name. And here I'm going to say toggle task is dispatch toggle task thunk with the ID. Seems pretty simple. Seems deceptively simple. Seems too simple. Shouldn't we have to do more work here? Well, we already did all of the defining how the state would change, right? We don't have to do that here anymore. All we have to do is, hey, just send this stuff. We already know the logic of our apps works. And now that happens. And all of that is moving through our Redux app. Now, if I had continued the test-driven development, I would have a list of everything that I know that my app works, which means if you're working on it later, not knowing why I did anything in my reducer that makes sense, I'd be like, well, I'll just do this. And if it doesn't work, you kind of know why. Now, I want to talk about kind of changing one more thing, which is that our reducer is now 54 lines of code for all of that, right? That means that as this grows, it's going to keep on getting bigger and bigger and bigger. How can we trim that down? Or how can we break this up if we had to? There is a library called Create Reducer, Redux Create Reducer. And what it can do for us is it can actually let us define an object of things. So we can start breaking this up. So I'm going to take my reducer function here, or one file, and make it a reducer folder. I'm going to put that inside and call it index. And now all of this stuff should be from dot/constants, right? But it all still works, yeah? Take a look at this. Yeah, it all still works. In fact, I'm going to now that I can do this just fine, I'm going to go back to my index and index.that, and I'm going to I'm just going to say that should work fine. Yeah, and I'm going to take out this second. Cool, now we only have the Redux version. And what I'm going to say here is, okay, index.js, there's just too much stuff here, way too much stuff here. So I'm going to break this up into a fetch tasks.js and add tasks.js and toggle task.js. And what I'm going to do is I am going to make little reducers for each one. Here we go, fetch started, fetch completed. I'm going to copy these over. Toggle task, still going to take state and action. I'm going to use that as a thing here. I'm going to say const fetch export const fetch started. Right? I'm going to make it just a little reducer. State action. Just the teeniest of reducers. And I'm going to say, hey, return state loading true. Right? In fact, now that I look at this, I don't really need that action, so I'm just even going to leave it out. This is fine. Export const fetch started. Export const fetch completed equals state action. Return tasks is action.tasks. Well, now that I think about it, I can kind of simplify this by just saying, hey, tasks, return tasks. And I really don't even need that state, so it's just, hey. I guess I can do that with arrays, but not that. That's fine. I might even just say like underscore as if to say, I don't care. Right? Okay, so these are now small, easy to digest. If you're looking through this thing and trying to figure out what that whole reducer does, you can just look at, oh, I just have fetch started and fetch completed. I can go back to my index reducer. I can say, import from fetch tasks. Let me see, fetch tasks. Where did I put that? Oh, I put that in toggle tasks, apparently. Ha ha ha, I'm a dum-dum. There we go. But fetch tasks, now this is just a couple of things. And I can say, fetch started, fetch completed. And here I could even just say like, hey, case fetch started, return fetch started state action. That's cool, right? Fetch completed, return fetch completed state action. This still feels like way too much typing though now, right? Like I've done way too much typing. We can all agree, so much typing. It's all of the typing. So I can bring in, there's a little utility called create reducer, and I find that as my reducers get bigger and bigger, this really saves me a lot of time and lets me like create actions generatively. Like I can get a lot of my code repetition. So here I'm going to say yarn add Redux create reducer. And I can say here, import and it is, yeah, just create reducer. So I'm going to now say export default function, export default, create reducer. I'm going to pass in my initial state and my handlers, which is going to be an object that's going to have like the this and the reducer. So I'm going to say that for fetch started, for fetch completed, fetch completed. And I can, like, I'm starting to make this all kind of work now. Add started. So now if I have a big, hairy, crazy reducer, I can keep on breaking it down into more parts and bring those pieces in and not have to write so much frickin' boilerplate. I also found, I was doing a game, a Sokoban game, which is like you're in a place and you're moving, like you move boxes into spots, and if it moves against the wall, you can't move it away from the wall. You can't pull it. You can just push it, right? And I made one where it's like, okay, well, I have to have rules for moving north, south, east, and west, so I'll just keep on adding rules of that. I have to do the things with it. And yeah, it just saved me a lot of time to be able to break out that or be able to make rules. Like all of the I can't move a box against the north wall is the same as I can't move a box against the west wall, right? I just had to change. So it's like, hey, everything I just said, but change my vector of direction. If it's this plus this plus this, then I can't do that. Otherwise, instead of this was this. So yeah, you can generate reducers as much as you want. And if you find yourself doing more of this, especially if the reason you went to Redux was because your app was complex, the ability to use functional means of like generating new functions of kind of like, oh, I have this and this and this, so I'll do this for this function, this for this function, is, yeah, it just saves a lot of headache. And yeah. Okay, so that's middleware. I use something called Thunk. There is actually a Redux Thunk. I just like the fact that I can write it so freaking quickly. But there is a Thunk middleware for Redux, which is pretty simple. There's also something called Redux Saga. I just worked with an alum who was given like a bunch of code with Redux Saga. It uses generators. It's actually pretty handy if you're used to generators. If not, whatever. And then kind of one of the bigger, badder ones is Redux Observable, which uses RxJS and is like, an observable is like the unholy godchild of like a, only love child of like a promise and an array. So like a promise is like a time box with one value, right? And an array is a space box that has like a bunch of values in it for one thing, right? So an observable is a stream that can keep on emitting more and more values over time. And so it's like all the time and also all of the space. It is the sort of stuff you hear Doctor Who ramble on about for a while, right? All the time and all the space. And also their emblem is a duck, which I really like. Yeah. So there is more stuff to get on. I can't remember if Netflix has done a bunch of great stuff on using reducers to make, or using observables especially. Observables are a next level thing. Like if you really want to like get used to, hey, all these things are coming in at this time and I know how to sort them in all the right places. Observables are a step, but if you're having trouble with map and filter now, focus on map and filter now. So I'm not sure how many of you had your interview, by the way. Yeah. So that is Redux. We kind of covered like a bit of test-driven development for reducers. We covered middleware, writing our own thunks, just basically writing a more general middleware and then having our things where they're able to sort of like trail those actions. We covered that there are more. We did the example again of linking stuff up. And I think there's one more thing I'd like to point out about the difference between the container pattern and Redux, actually, now that I think about it. So in our presenter, we have a to-do list item. We have a new task form, right? And the new task form is a child of has the add task, right? And it gets the add task from the presenter. And if there was stuff in here, it would be like, I get that from the thing, and I get that from the thing, and I get that from the thing. What we can do is we can decide, look, we know perfectly well that the new task form is going to trigger an action. We don't need to pass that from presenter to presenter. So what we can say here is, let me see, it only needs the add task. So I can say, let's bring in import connect from React Redux, import from Redux thunks the add task thunk. And so this new task form, it's still just a presenter, but I can say const connected new task form equals connect. My state is just gonna, this can just be a, I don't actually really need anything from this, so I might even just say, hey, just give me an empty what's it, because I don't have any state to pass as props. And with the dispatch, this is where we're going to say the map dispatch to props is just, hey, add task is, with the task name, is going to be dispatch add task thunk task name. And we connect that to the new task form. We can now connected new task form. Can go there. I don't have to add tasks to it. We're going to do yarn start again. Hopefully I didn't screw up anything too bad in the reducer. Give that a moment. So now this one, if we look in the React tab, this one here, connected to-do list presenter. We go down, here is a new task form that's getting add task passed to it from the parent. But this connect one doesn't have that. And yet within it, it has the exact same form of an add task that's getting the add task from the parent. So now I don't have to do the same thing. One of the things amazing about Redux is that I don't have to be passing everything through every prop. I can connect something lower down straight to Redux. So now when I say play banjo, it's now added. So this one, even though I'm not passing it up from the top, is still connected, and this one is also doing the same thing. But now I can have pieces further down that have their own connection upwards. These to-do list items, I could take that toggle, and instead of passing it up, I could just make them connected on their own, where it's like, hey, I'm going to pass in something, and maybe even an ID, and they build it up themselves. So this is part of the majesty and glory of Redux. There's a React context API that is kind of doing that part of it, which is really cool. So it'll be kind of native React. You'll be able to do that particular aspect, but it's this whole other thing that's also complicated, like so many other things are. Are there any questions? If you're feeling that this is making sense, that's totally fine. I suggest that you kind of come back to this. We have the YouTube. This will make sense as you keep on going. If you find yourself doing a Redux thing, you'll want to come back to this and be like, oh, okay, there's the Redux thing. I ended up a couple cohorts ago, there were 3 people who had the same tech assessment that was Redux for all of them, and I kind of worked with them to like get it making sense. And yeah, it takes a bit of changing your mindset and thinking about things over time, but yeah. Okay, I will have notes out and I will talk to you guys later.
When you said tech assessment, you meant like take home?
Yeah, when I say tech assessment, I mean like, yeah, basically a take-home tech project, which by the way, if you get those, you can come in and we can talk about approaches.
You're all
Yeah.
Redux?
Huh?
All 3 of them.
The same company.
Yeah, it was the same company. They all got the same assessment. Why they didn't sit together and do them, I do not know. Because the truth is that, like, I don't mind helping with your assessment because the truth is that when you also have technical challenges, you can continue to come and see me in alumni hours. Right? Like, I still exist. and you will have. I'm not sure if you know this. You'll have ongoing. You can come in for an hour a week, if you would like. That is the limit, though. You know, here's the thing: is that is the limit, though. I often, huh?
Sam's in the co-center.
Sam, yeah, that's the thing is that I do know a few people who like will do an hour with me, and then I see them an hour with Dawn later, and I'm like, oh, you crafty devils.
Wait, so you have to like book it or something?
Yeah, you have to book it, and usually it's like we just find a time in our schedules that works. And yeah, I will say that especially if it's something that I'm not bored with, which I'm sorry to say it that way, but if it's something where it's like, actually, I would like to know better about how this works, so let's work on it together, I'll often do a couple more. Like I did 2 hours on Monday with Gabriel on, Gabriel Hildreth.
Where is he working
He is still looking. Although, yeah, he was doing pretty well in this tech assessment. He's going to turn it in, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's going to hear something back. And then if not, I actually have another place that I'm looking to put him up for personally. But yeah, also if you work with me in alumni hours, I'll be more likely to know where you are. So when someone's like, "How's Chiboy doing?" I'm like, "Well, he's really good with this and this and this. We worked on it." But yeah, that is like if it's worked on something that's kind of interesting and we're kind of figuring it together. Like I have no problem kind of spending a little more time because that was like it was really interesting what he was working on. And it was on a thing that I wanted to know how to do better. The tech assessment had to do with OAuth and connecting to OAuth from a React app, which was interesting because the way that I'd always done OAuth had been to direct you to another page and then direct you back. But he had a few things that were like, actually, you can do it via HX instead of just redirects. And I was like, oh, can you? So I learned a bunch of stuff as well. And also, that helped me get a little more comfortable with Passport. If you guys know Passport. Passport is it's a mechanism for doing validation schemes or authentication schemes rather, in Express. And it's handy. You just kind of say like how an authentication thing should work, and then it does the redirection, and then it's able to get something back, and you save it to your database as you need, and it has things like, hey, if we have a session, and you should have I think it was like a serialized and deserialized user. So serialized was like, okay, we'll just put their ID in the session, and deserialized was, hey, given a session from the ID, can we find this person? And it was really clever. So we got to work with that a bit. It was helpful. All right, those are the things that I know. I will see you guys on Friday.